As we start to finish enjoying breakfast, the buffet will still be out for a little while longer, and we know that. And our caregivers who are here with our adults with MPS and ML, you are welcome to sit through the first presentation because it's quite special. And then, of course, we're going to ask you to leave and let your young adults just have their day. But I am so happy to see all of you. For those that don't know, we are live streaming this conference today. So for all of our adults with MPS and ML that were not able to come, they're watching us, and they're going to be able to engage with asking questions of our presenters, and we're just really pleased we were able to bring a conference to you guys in this format. I'm Terry Klein, and I'm the President and CEO of the National MPS Society. I have the distinct pleasure of being able to introduce our first speaker, Seth Rotberg. I originally met Seth about 3 years ago at a conference in South Dakota, and he was instructing or he was attendee, I don't remember which now, Seth, but you were there. And PPALS is an organization that prides themselves on educating patient advocacy leaders so they can understand patient advocacy organizations. And so my predecessor, Barbara Hayes, and I are asked to go back each year to speak, and this is where I met Seth. And from that point, Seth has truly inspired me, not only as a parent, but as a young adult who is going to really show you how he's carved a path in his journey despite his diagnosis. And so I want everyone to welcome Seth Rotberg.
All right. How's everyone doing? Good? No pressure from Terry or anything, right? Not at all. I appreciate that one. Well, as mentioned, again, my name is Seth Rotberg. I come from a family impacted by a different rare disease known as Huntington's disease. And I'm here today to share more about my story, my journey, and try to help maybe empower some of you all to get more involved or find your purpose in life of how to take that next step. So it really started actually when I decided I wanted to get tested for Huntington's disease. And prior to that, I was actually living with a lot of unknowns, which I'm sure many of you are quite aware of, about trying to find answers, trying to figure out what's that next step look like, potential misdiagnosis. And I'm going to take you back to really where it really started. So that's my mom, my sister, and myself. And it really started when I was 12 years old, when we started noticing something was different for my mom. She had these wobbly movements, poor balance, tripping and falling over. We had neighbors who thought she might have been drinking during the day because of these movements and the slurred speech. There was times where one moment her and I are just having a simple conversation, and then suddenly she's lashing out at me, or she's frustrated, or she's just simply depressed. And of course, we all have our clumsy moments, and we all have our bad days, but this was consistent, and it was something was off, and we didn't know what it was. And it was tough to really accept what the doctors were telling us, because they said, oh, she has mood swings, she's bipolar, she has major depression. But we knew it had to be more than that. And the chaotic household continued as my older sister went off to college in Arizona, and it was my dad and I, and it got to the point where we had a family intervention. It was an ultimatum. We said, Mom, we're either going to leave the house and just kind of take care of ourselves, or we need to check you into a facility to get more tests done and figure out what the heck is going on. She was not happy with that, and who would be happy with hearing from your loved one saying, oh, by the way, we're going to check you into a mental facility to go get checked to figure out what's going on and finding out the answers. Well, I can't, I'll keep this PG, so she let's just say there was a couple swear words here and there, and it was a tough battle for her to eventually accept it, but she did because we all knew that was really the only choice. And then after many doctor's visits and evaluations, we found out my mom had this rare neurological genetic disease known as Huntington's disease. I might reference it as HD, similar to how you guys mentioned MPS. You know, it's there's too many acronyms in the rare disease space, but for this case, HD is like having ALS, Alzheimer's, and Parkinson's all into one condition. It slowly deteriorates a person's physical and cognitive abilities over 10 to 20 years. Like many rare diseases, there's no cure. And once showing symptoms, you have about 10 to 20 years of living. Each child of a parent with it has a 50-50 chance of inheriting it. So I remember my parents sat me down at the age of 15 at the kitchen table saying, you know, Seth, we found out that Mom has Huntington's disease, but they didn't really understand it either. It was kind of like the basics. And so I went to our good friend, Dr. Google. Raise your hand if you've ever been to Dr. Google to find answers. I would hope everyone at this point. It's either a good thing or bad thing, because the good thing is you find the answers. The bad thing is it's overwhelming and there's way too much to process. And that's kind of what I went to, and I was like, okay, yeah, she has this, she has this, she has this. Oh, okay, this too? Okay. And so in all reality, I was in denial. I didn't want to accept it because I knew it was going to be a part of my life for the rest of my life. I felt like I lost out on my childhood experience because my friends' parents were normal, and I didn't really have anyone who truly understood what I was going through. It was like I was over here in my own sandbox, and everyone else was over playing on the jungle gym. And it was tough. It was tough to feel like I was fitting in, and that sense of isolation definitely caused a lot of struggles throughout my high school and beyond. Because ultimately I had to take on additional responsibilities, taking my mom out for errands, you know, doing a lot of chores, and really just grew up a lot faster than my peers. And I would just get into arguments with my mom over the littlest things because of that. And I realized, looking back, I was upset because she wasn't normal, right? She was sick, and I just didn't want to deal with it. So I would stay away from my house as much as possible. I'd go to friends' houses. I would say after school, I'd pick up jobs. I would play sports just because I wanted to fit in with my peers. I wanted to fit into society. But it really changed when I went to college, and I went back to our friend Dr. Google, and I started looking more into it and realized I was at risk, that it was a flip of a coin. Heads, I get it. Tails, I don't get it. And the reason why I went back was because I noticed I resembled a lot of similar traits as my mom. I would, drop my phone, or I'd trip over something, or forget an earlier conversation, and I would immediately think, okay, is this Huntington's disease, or is this just all in my head as a typical college student? And so I even thought about my freshman year in college, should I get tested? It's one of the toughest decisions I had to think about because of how it would impact my future. And I spoke with my sister and my aunt about it, and they kind of talked me out of it, but I felt like I needed to do something to kind of give back because of that denial stage in my life. And so now I was at this, okay, I'm processing it, I'm trying to accept it. What can I do next? So I talked to a good friend of mine, and we decided to put on this basketball charity event. We said, let's do something. Let's throw on this 3-on-3 basketball charity event called Hoops for Huntington's Disease. Let's raise some money. Let's raise some awareness. And honestly, this is my way of coping. Everyone has their own way of coping with a disease within the family or within your own diagnosis. And for me, I was like, I love sports. I want to make a difference, and so I want to put on a charity event and not think about whether or not I need to test. But, of course, it kept coming back because of the impact it would have on my future. And I know a lot of you can relate to that of thinking about what does the future hold. For me, it was like, okay, if I have it, what does my family planning look like? How do I date? Do I have kids still? These were questions I kept thinking over and over and over again, like, what's my career path? Do I go the money-driven route, or do I still find something that's meaningful? And so, it really became draining. It was something that I just was tired of thinking about. I didn't want to live with the unknown, and so I decided to go through testing. The testing process took about 2 weeks, and I remember walking into the neurologist's office when he told me the news of saying, Seth, your test results came back positive for Huntington's disease. And so at that time, I knew what my future would be, and I said, okay, in my head, I have 2 options. One, tuck those results in my back pocket and continue to just, dwell on it and not do anything, or just get more involved and really use my results as motivation to fight back. And luckily, of course this happens. Luckily, I chose the latter and haven't really looked back. So what started as, a 3-on-3 basketball charity event turned into many other opportunities doing fundraising, advocacy, volunteer efforts. But in all honesty, I was still struggling to really process those results. And how do you live that new normal? I think what the biggest challenge was what would my friends and family think about it? How do I tell them that I just tested positive? And then how do I not be afraid that they may judge me, that they may look at me different? And I think that was one thing that I really struggled with, and I still struggle with today, is the fear of being judged by others, by whether it's our appearance or it's how we look or our condition. And it's even about dating, right? Dating is tough, and that's something for probably a whole new session. But I think what's tough is those who just don't get it, and how do we explain to them, not so that they get it, but that they appreciate it and that they just simply listen to us. And I just didn't really have that person that really understood at a whole new level. I didn't know other young adults at the time who were dealing with HD or any rare disease. And so I felt a bit isolated from society, as I mentioned before, because I didn't really have that person or that group as a lot of you have today, and what I also now have today. I didn't have that growing up, and it was tough because where do I turn for that support, especially that peer-to-peer support, and to talk to others who kind of get me and know where I'm coming from. So I kind of kept my story hidden for a few years. I would tell a few friends at a time, but what changed was really was 2 experiences in my life. The first happened my last semester of college, the day before actually, where my good friend Jake, he passed away in an unexpected accident. And Jake was always living his life in the moment. He was always just trying to do his best each day. He wasn't focusing on the future. He was focusing on what can I do today to make the most of it. And I remember there's a quote that was in his senior year of high school yearbook, but it was also on his headstone, and it's now also on my back as a tattoo, is live as if you were to die tomorrow, learn as if you were to live forever. And that really stuck to me because I said, okay, what can I do to do the same as Jake? Shortly after that, another friend of mine, her name was Megan, she had this juvenile version of Huntington's disease, and to kind of sum it up, it progresses a lot faster in kids. She passed away at the age of 26, but she was willing to share her story, and she just always had a smile on her face, and she just didn't care what people thought. And so I thought, in my head, two friends gone too fast who really taught me the little things to appreciate in life, and how can I make a similar difference? How can I have a positive outlook on life and really focus one day at a time? And that really is what changed my perception on making my story, my test results more public. I really wanted to do it not so that people would feel bad. I wouldn't say, I tested positive, I just want to let you know, feel bad for me. No, it was more to tell them because I wanted to use my story and more importantly, my voice to make a difference within the community. I wanted to be able to do things like Jake and Megan to really make a difference and to have an impact. So it really allowed me to be more open with my personal story. It helped me figure out how I can also make a difference to discuss what it's like living as a young adult with a health condition. So I started gravitating towards different organizations specifically for young adults. One of them was called the Huntington's Disease Youth Organization, also known as HDO, and their mission is to provide support and education to young adults around the world who are impacted by Huntington's disease. I gravitated towards them because of my own sense of isolation growing up. I didn't want another young adult in the Huntington's disease space to go through that. I wanted them to realize that they're not alone and that I'm here for them as well as others to support them throughout their journey. And the realization really started my sophomore year in college when I remember there's a friend of mine who lived right down the hall from me, and she said, "Hey Seth, my friend's coming to visit, and by the way, her mom also has Huntington's disease." And my face was just like, wait, what? There's another young person who's dealing with it, who understands me? And the moment I met them, it was like I didn't have to explain myself. It was like we knew each other for years. We didn't even have to talk about Huntington's disease. We just, that whole normalcy came back to reality. I said, okay, I can deal with this. I have one friend now who understands me. And that's when I realized I could simply be myself, as you can see in this picture of me trying to do a little dance moves. I'm not the best dancer, but bear with me, right? So my hope was to really provide support to other young adults, and HGO really gave me that beginning platform to do that. It allowed me to connect young adults not just to the professional support, but that peer-to-peer support that's truly missing, not just in Huntington's disease, but in a lot of these rare diseases, because we come to these conferences, we connect with fellow peers, and it's amazing. But then we have to wait until that following conference the next year to reconnect with them in person. And so how can we fix that? How can we provide more year-round services, both in person as well as virtually? And that's something I really am passionate about. So in 2018, which was simply last year, I took the next step to really open my horizon to not just focus on Huntington's disease, but the rare disease space in general. And it's crazy that it's really only been almost 2 years since I really dove deeper into this. And it happened because of a TEDx talk that I was able to do in my hometown. Raise your hand if you're familiar with like TEDx. Okay, so many people here. So I was fortunate. I had these Google alerts set up in my hometown, and I came across it. So I guess I have to give a recognition to Google. Thank you, Google, for allowing me this. And the theme was stories that inspire. And I thought, well, I think I might be able to do this. Let me give it a shot. And the next thing you know, I'm accepted, and I'm in front of 800 people ready to talk. But one issue happened that day, or you could say it was a blessing in disguise. So I was the third person to talk. I had my headphones in. I was bumping some music. I don't know if anyone's familiar with Whitney Houston, I Want to Dance with Somebody. Great song. Definitely top choice music when you're trying to get in the zone, right? So when it was my turn to go on stage, again, third person going, we already did the mic checks. Here's what happened, all right? So I started talking, and I'm talking, and eventually came down to someone in the back says, "Seth, we can't hear you." And I was like, oh, this isn't good. And so, again, it was like a blessing in disguise because it kind of broke the ice. I was like, well, I don't think it could get any worse. So luckily got a handheld mic, and as you can see, it's not as noticeable. It's noticeable for me, but you'll see like I got my boy band headset in, and then I got the handheld mic. But what I really learned from that talk was two things. One is that when you are giving a talk, it's not about memorizing it word for word. It's really about memorizing the sections. And remember that you know your story more than anyone else. So don't feel obligated to apologize if you mess up, because no one knows that unless they're your speaking coach, or if they are trying to, help. I guess, take a step back. They won't know that unless really you're talking to them or you practice in front of them. And the second thing I learned is that everyone here has a voice. Everyone here has a story. And I guarantee it, everyone here has a powerful story, because I heard some of them yesterday. I talked to some amazing people yesterday, and I'm a big believer that you don't need to do a TEDx talk, but you can share your story in different ways, whether it's through an article, a blog post, a podcast, your local newspaper. And don't be afraid to share it, because at the end of the day, you're making a difference. Whether you tell one friend or you do a big talk in front of a bunch of people, I think that's what you need to remember the most. This TEDx talk opened many doors, many speaking opportunities, but more importantly, like I said, it opened my eyes to the rare disease community. And I don't know what went off in my head to make me think, oh, I should dive deeper into this rare disease space. I think it kind of clicked to say, I want to learn more about others. I want to help more people. I want to just connect people to one another. One of my friends calls me the connector, because I love to help people. So if you come up to me, I'll say, hey, let me find you a place to share your story. How can I help you? Because that's what I was learning growing up, is that I didn't have that help. And so I want to do my job to help others make sure that they know that they aren't alone and that they aren't struggling. Plus, I guess I really wanted to learn from those before me. So people like Terry, who has been there, and not reinvent the wheel. I wanted to learn from those who could mentor me and to guide me along the way. And then it also helped that when I reached out to people, I said, hey, do you know what a TEDx talk is? I did this TEDx talk, and by the way, can we do like a 30-minute conversation on the phone? And it really helped craft the email up and the conversation while trying to figure out those next steps. But what I'm most excited about sharing is what happened earlier this year. It was the start of this organization called Our Odyssey. Our Odyssey really started because I started connecting with other people in the rare disease space. I started connecting with other young adults. And what I learned was that even though we had different health conditions, we had a similar journey. We had a similar set of needs that weren't being addressed. A lot of times in the rare disease space or in the health space in general, we focus a lot on children and older adults and caregivers. And then there's this subset that we tend to not address, especially when we're talking about transitional care. Sometimes we forget about the holistic approach. So what I've learned is there's a lot of similarity when we talk about how to date, family planning, transitioning into college, transitioning into a career, how to self-advocate, how do you talk to your friends and family about it, grief and loss. The list goes on. But we simply just wanted to fit in with our peers. And we wanted someone to hear us and wanted someone to be there for us, and ultimately wanted to find people who could simply understand what we're going through. So as I continued to meet other young adults, it really hit me when I was at a rare disease, it was Rare Disease Week earlier this year, and I was talking to a young woman, and I was talking to her about this idea. I said, someone should do something about this. And they said, you're right. Are you going to do something about this? Yeah, I'm going to do something about this. Sure. Yeah. I'll figure it out. Let's just do it. And from that point on was really how our Odyssey formulated. And our organization, our mission is to really connect young adults impacted by a rare chronic condition to social emotional support in the hope of improving quality of life. We do this through in-person meetups, virtual meetups, and we're really focusing in, especially on 2020, mainly on the Northeast for the in-person meetups, Boston, Philly, New York, DC, before we start to expand into other cities. But it's really that year-round support that I was mentioning before. And that's really where we want to focus in on. But more importantly, we want to make sure no young adult feels that sense of isolation and eventually empower them to get more involved. Whether it's getting more involved with our Odyssey, but more importantly, getting more involved within your own community. That's what the goal is. Getting more involved, in this case, with the MPS Society, perhaps, and really taking on a bigger leadership role and knowing that you're more than capable of doing it, and you have a whole, army of people here to support you. So this idea really turned into a reality because I was just trying to understand what those set of needs were, what the challenges were in the community, and how I could be a little piece to the puzzle to address that. But what I also learned after being, especially at the banquet last night, is that you all have each other's back. You guys are like a big family, right? It's like a tribe. I call it like a tribe, a community. And what's awesome is that no matter what happens, you all can support one another through the good times as well as the bad times. And I believe that that's going to help improve quality of life, is finding those people who get it, finding those people who understand what you're going through. But more importantly, understanding that it's not just people in this room. As we know, there's thousands, probably actually millions of other people who can relate to what we're going through and who can really just sit down and have a conversation with us without us feeling like we're being judged or feeling like, we have to be something or someone that we aren't because of what society tells us. For me, I think it's important to really find those resources and support. I would say I love music. As you could see, my Whitney Houston playlist. But I also like playing sports. I like to stay up to date with what's the latest research in my community. I go to therapy. For me, that's what my support, that's my resources. I like hanging out with friends And I am a big Boston sports fan, so don't hold that against me. For those who hate the Patriots, I get it. I get it. I understand. Oh boy. I love all sports, I promise. But more importantly, what I'll leave you with is this: is after today, write down, make a list of what makes you happy. Make a list of what do you enjoy, but also make a list of what are your resources out there. And you can consider your friends and your family resources, but what else? Is it journaling? Is it listening to music? Is it hating on the Patriots? It could be that. But really make that list and then kind of reflect on it. Figure out what is it that makes you happy and makes you you. Don't think about what society tells you. Don't think about what your peers are telling you. Think about for you. What can you do for yourself to make the most of each day and to take that next step to a better tomorrow? That's all I got, so thank you very much.